So this is introduction into the Yugoslavian, who I would say is some sort of counter-ideological creature. Please take this as a joke at the beginning. But I will continue. So why counter-ideological creature? In a sense, what is the big other saying to the Yugoslav? Don't trust the big other. So this is the fundamental principle of ideological identification of a Yugoslav is that the Yugoslav identifies with a very doubt in ideology. Why? Why is that so? So I was wondering, when thinking of Yugoslavia, I'm not often thinking of those things, but I was particularly for this conference trying to think of the Yugoslavia. So why? I think because of some historical circumstances. One is that in Yugoslavia, or in this particular territory, we changed a lot of different state forms or forms of authority. So we had classical aristocracy, the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Then we had the kingdom, the People's Republic, the Socialist Republic. So basically everyone in the 20th century would live at least in two different states, or maybe in three or in four. So this means that for the means of survival, Yugoslav developed some sort of reluctance towards the ideology. So ideology is saying something, but we know that actually, every ideology is the same. This one is the same as the previous one, and always they want to ideology is perceived a fraud and so on. The other set of circumstances is, I think, the fact that Yugoslavia split with Stalin in 1948, and which meant that we had some sort of parallax view on the West, on the capitalist West on the one hand, and a socialist, Stalinist socialism on the other hand. So Yugoslav thinkers, philosophers, and also politicians, because politicians were often also philosophers. They were criticizing capitalism, both capitalism and Soviet socialism, and at the same time their own socialist project. So you have a lot of theoretical production, which is critical towards our own social experiment. I called it social experiment because there were 4 constitutions which were starting from a People's Republic in 1945 to after split with Stalin, still People's Republic, beginning of, I don't have the number, so I'm sorry, the constitutions were 4 in the interwar Yugoslavia. It was 45, 53, 63, and 74. So the first constitution was People's Republic of Yugoslavia, the second as well, the third yet, it was a socialist Yugoslavia, and then the fourth. But they developed a very unique principle of self-management, which you could say, or is known as a third way, something in between, of course, still socialist country, but with more openness to the market enterprises and so on. I will go into this a little bit later. And so, why speaking of Yugoslavia today? I think there are three reasons. One is that Yugoslavia is some sort of a proof that there is a democratic socialism possible. Then, in a way, we will go into this later, it also shows that it is possible that you somehow combine the more centralized government and control from the top down, and at the same time a dispersive government and cooperation from the bottom up. So, yeah. So for this conference, I gave myself a task to study Yugoslav constitutions and compare them to Soviet ones, particularly to Stalin's and Lenin's, and to try to understand, first of all, what were the conceptual or the basic differences coming out of those different constitutions. So, and of course, I was also comparing it to the declaration, to French constitution as an example of European Republican constitution. So, as a general thing, so maybe Andreas will correct me because I'm not a specialist in this, but what I observed through this comparison is that, okay, so the Western countries would take declaration, like Rousseau's Declaration of the Rights of man and a citizen, as the fundament for their constitutions. So, and of course, the first constitution was the constitution of the French Revolution, which didn't even, which was written but then never was really executed, or how to say, never
fulfilled, implemented.
Implemented. Thank you. Yeah. So, in this constitution, you have basic human rights and basic political rights. Basic human rights, you know, inviolability of human life, and you know all other human rights. I will not. We know were human rights, and political rights, particularly the right to vote, the general right to vote. And all other rights, and of course the freedoms, the freedom of speech, the freedom of moving, you know, all the freedoms of expression, of creation, of okay. But I would say, so then we have Marx's critique of the declaration. Which maybe some would say it's obscure. It's very very plain in the Jewish on the Jewish question in this text of early Marx, and I think that Stalin's constitution and all Yugoslav constitutions basically start or take this Marx critique as a starting point, but not Lenin's. Lenin's takes this dictatorship of proletariat as the starting point. So what does it mean? It means that both Stalin's, but all the more so the first and second Yugoslav constitution, they take everything what is in the French constitution. So you have the same rights, exactly the same rights also in Stalin's constitution and also Yugoslav constitutions. You have all the freedoms and all the rights. Also the right of free speech, free press, the right of gathering, even the right in Yugoslav to establish political parties or religious communities, as long as they are not against the constitution. So, and what they add, so you have these things also in Yugoslav and Stalin's constitution. But what they add is a definition of economic system, not only political system, but also the economic system. Which means that when you define the economic system, you add another set of rights, which we call them today social justice. So you get a number of articles that establish or are there to establish the basics for social justice. Or they can be also expressed in the terms of freedom, like freedom to work, freedom to enjoy the products of your work, and so on. And especially in Yugoslav constitution, not in Stalin's, it's all about creativity. It's about, freedom to create. You have in the first constitution, 46, you have written that the state must support art, science, and the freedom of artistic and artistic expression and scientific research. Okay, so, and you have a number of articles. So there are a few, like in Stalin's are more scarce, in Yugoslav are really elaborated, that protect social justice. For example, all of them, okay, this is the legal rights, it's, the political rights. So in Stalin's, in Yugoslav, of course, you have the voting right for women. And in both, you also have the right that the women will have the same, how to say, that the same, the right to take the same work as men, and the right to work. But only Yugoslav constitution, which I think is quite unique, you have in 46 written that women must be paid the same as a man for the same work. And okay, and then another set of social rights is, of course, free education, free health system, free infrastructure, and public infrastructure, which means that it's much more cheap. The obligation of the states towards people that they will have the apartments, so they will have that there will not be homeless people, and this was quite true. And I will remember. There are more. Of course, the reproductive work for women. This was in both constitutions, in Stalin's and in Yugoslav, was protected in a sense that so they both have in constitution the shortening of the working day to 7 hours per day. They both have in this constitution paid holidays, paid maternity leave, establishment of the system of kindergartens, and public means as how you call this, the kitchens, public kitchens for kids and for the workers, so that there is less reproductive work that goes on the domestic work and on women, of course. Okay, so these are the, okay. And what else? besides this economy that is part of the constitution, what only Yugoslav constitutions would have is that they define not only the internal political structure, but also they define their foreign policy. So what is in Yugoslav constitution, I didn't see this anywhere before, but of course I didn't study all, is that they have the foreign policy in their constitution, which is that they will, it's a policy of peaceful coexistence, basically, not to, okay. So, okay. Now, I want to, okay, one thing. Why I think it's very important that we don't speak only about constitutions, because this is still, you know, what you were talking about all the time, the written part, it's the symbolic, and of course the reality can be very different. So what we can share between us is the symbolic part, the imaginary part, but particularly also the experience. The experience I would say, experience is a singularity of the society. It's the real of a society. It's what cannot be actually shared, except from if it's lived through, but and cannot be symbolized. So how to share experience? It's somehow, I think, in conferences like this, it's very important that we don't become, like, we don't turn around about these abstract notions of democracy, blah, blah, blah. And this conference was not like this. It is very important that we speak about very particular things, and through this, we can make some universal, maybe, knowledge, no? Okay, so, Anna? Ah, yeah, okay. So, I'll go very quickly through this. So this was invasion of the Axis forces on Yugoslavia. This little chicken is Slovenia. So me and Gregor are from Slovenia. So Slovenia was immediately divided into three Axis forces. So it was annexed to Reich, to Hungary, and to fascist Italy. So all of a sudden, Slovenians were like, the Slovenian language was forbidden, Slovenian schools were closed. There was, of course, especially by fascists, the genocide. Not genocide, not, I'm like, I wouldn't say genocide, but concentration camps, burning of villages, and so on. So it was a sudden moment of annihilation of your existence. So then Croatia was, as you see, more or less German and Italian puppet state, which became later, so this was the trauma that was then repressed in the socialist times, but then of course in the Balkan Wars this, you know, came out. So Serbia was occupied, so the bombarding of Belgrade at the beginning, April in 41, and the other parts was also were also annexed to. So what happened? People started to organize, and even before that, there were Yugoslavias. So there was the idea of connection of southern Slavs. So after the First World War, when the Austro-Hungarian Empire fell apart, there were a few different forms of Yugoslavia before that. Okay, so when the occupation happened, like as I said, people went into the woods and started to fight against the occupiers. In most of the territory, Communist Party was the leader, but in Slovenia it was a little bit different, because this was a National Liberation Front where 20 different groups, parties participated. Also socialist, Christian socialists, liberals, the cultural groups, and so on. And what you see in red, these are the osvobojeni territories. So it's the independent territories. So it's the territories that they fought for. So how to say? Freed territories. And this was a little bit moving like this, where the free territories would be. And then slowly these territories were getting bigger and bigger, and after the Italy falling apart, 43, there was a new force, also like in the spirit. So, for example, Slovenian partisans were the first armed formation that entered Reich. And at the end of the war, this was liberated by people. Of course, the Allies helped, Americans helped, but just the last half a year. I mean, maybe they started after the 43 a little bit, but yeah. So it was this spirit of people really winning their own land back. So this is a quote from Kardelj. Edvard Kardelj is the leading theorist of self-management in Yugoslavia. His work is not translated, but it's huge. And he also wrote the 4 constitutions, the how to say, the template, and then the assembly would discuss. So he says, for example, that national liberation committees were the basics for self-management, because this already happened in the national liberation fight. So already of course, the Communist Party was slowly taking over, so they started to organize assembly systems already during the war. And after the war, there was a big meeting of all those assembly members, and they established this People's Republic, which was not Socialist Republic. It was not about working people's revolution. It was about people getting back their land, their language, their nationality. So nationality for small nations is, or nationalism for small nations can be constitutive. So some partisans' pictures. This is a partisan poet. He's a very good poet. And of course, the pictures themselves were artistic products. You have exhibitions of this guy who died in the war. But what was super important was partisan names. People would use partisan names to protect themselves against the. Oh, yeah, we will not come to the constitutions, but it's okay. So. So when you have like the whole system of partisan names, you have a separate or parallel reality of non-existent people, and all those people also, not all, but many of them also write poetry, prose, or they draw, they make pictures, they make art. So artistic production, literally production, was one very important part of Yugoslav partisan fight, which meant that Yugoslav is not only a Hegelian, but also Lacanian, because they realized that it is not a person who produces thought, but it is thought that produces, that it's actually common and produces then people. So this is okay. So this is important. So Yugoslavia in 1948. So you have 2 blocks, and the neutral countries, Switzerland, and Finland, no? And you have Yugoslavia as the third non-aligned country. Yugoslavia, of course, was the initiator of the non-alignment movement, which, of course, we didn't talk about much. This was established in '61, but it's still the second biggest community of nations besides the United Nations. Okay, I will just point out the main thing, which is, this is the key. So how does the self-management differentiate not only from capitalism, but also from Soviet socialism? So I'll read this. Self-management actually begins where capitalist private property ceases and where that process of the liberation of labor and the working man begins, which at the same time begins to exclude the state property monopoly with its bureaucratic, technocratic deformations. So the key idea is that Yugoslavia thinks that they were in a stage of Soviet Union, but they transgressed, sublated it. So I will, for to the end, read also this one. We thought that the state ownership, this is Kardelj, of course, sorry, I forgot to say. We thought that the state ownership form of social property was necessary at a certain stage of our socialist revolution, and we think, this is the text from 1976, just 1 year before, so 2 years after the Constitution of Self-Management. And of course, he speaks of socialism. But this is retroactive imposition of the notion of socialism to what was before, because socialism was not mentioned before '63. So, okay. So he's making up the history of Yugoslavia. We thought that the state ownership form of social property was necessary at a certain stage of our socialist revolution, and we think that in many other countries this form of social property will continue to be necessary in the future, especially at the stage which Marx and Engels called the act of expropriation of the expropriators. However, state property monopoly as a relationship between people is, historically speaking, still connected as if by an umbilical cord to the property categories belonging to the socio-economic formations in which production forces were in one hand and the means of production in another hand. So, meaning that for Yugoslav socialist, Soviet socialism is still a little bit bourgeois. So, I will finish.
Thanks very much. So they didn't use socialism before? You said no. 63? Wow, I didn't know that. Okay, the floor is open. Who would like to ask a question? So what would be your response to the usual criticism that this was all fake, etc.? Like, as we discussed yesterday, you can write down many rights into the Constitution and then not fulfill them, unlike the procedure, you know.
This is a question.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know about this.
Yeah, of course, things are not that black and white. One is idea, and Constitution, the other is reality. But generally, people were not that, it was not totalitarian country, this is what we agree. So life was quite easy, and we discussed this, compared our experiences with Katie before. So our borders were open, there was private property to a certain extent allowed, so we were never, we had our choice to a certain extent. I said to Katie, you could buy 5 yogurts, different yogurts, not 50, but not only one or or none. Also, what was good was that this equality between people, relative equality, because there were not how to say. So the lowest salary and the highest salary was one against 4. So the director of a company would have 4,000 and the cleaning lady 1,000, which was still, a very good.
In Soviet Union, it was similar. Actually, I don't know the exact number. But it's comparable.
And people, and also there was relative freedom of speech. It was, I would say, more freedom of speech than now in America, for sure.
What about Germany?
And it's freedom of speech. I shouldn't say it.
Here you go.
Thank you. Very interesting. I'm just wondering, so why did Yugoslavia fall apart?
Yeah, this is a good question.
Did everyone hear the question?
Why did Yugoslavia fall apart? Okay, as a Hegelian, you know that every inner reason is connected to the outer reason, or the reason, the reason. Of course, this is interconnected. Yugoslavs believed, maybe there is another quote, that they created. This is the enterprises, the self-management enterprises in Yugoslavia, and what they believed. Our self-governing system has proved beyond doubt that this is a real progressive course, although for some people here and abroad, the path and the goal seemed utopian. But they proved that this is a real progressive course. And, and what also they believed, and what they believed is that there will be no more political parties, pluralism without political parties, and I lost this one. But okay, I would say it by myself. It's they believe that they made a template system that it will be a good example for other nations, and that this will spread through the world. But we have to know this is 74, the self-management in its full scale, and then Thatcher and Reagan are in 79. So if there was no Thatcher and Reagan, maybe this wouldn't go this way. It would be a little bit different. Because Yugoslavia, of course, was connected to international capital. As somebody said, it's impossible to stay totally. So there was also famous Tito's, famous debts. But I would say, debts then were like this comparing to our debts right now. I mean, so these were the outer reasons. The capital, actually the capitalist octopus, coming into Yugoslavia. And there were also, some problems that these directors of those companies would be taking money out of the country, illegally. So this was also exhaustion but this is not probably so important. But the inner tensions were also very important, which were on the nationalist base. But basically, it was the nationalist was only the aftermath. The main problem was that Slovenians, it's always the same. Slovenians thought that they produce a lot and they always just give to the lazy Macedonians and so on. This was the big problem. And also Slovenians were also frustrated that in Belgrade there is a center, that it's centralized toward Belgrade. But they thought that So it was Slovenians who cooked this soup, for sure. And it is them who started this. Because we had referendum, there was decision 90% that we want to separate, But this was in the constitution, Yugoslav constitution, there was a right to separate. But, you know, others didn't agree, and Serbia didn't agree, basically, and the war started. And then all the frustration, the nationalists, and, you know, from the Second World War came out, no? And, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Bara, did you also work on this guy, Branislav Jakovljević, who writes a little bit on, he's comparing also the constitutions, and I think I really liked how you underlined the whole idea of self-management, and you underlined that it was like a ongoing experiment. There were, the very fact that there were so many constitutions, I think quite clearly shows that even the government actually meant it, like they really tried to do something. They really tried to produce something, and especially with connection that I think you also very well underlined, namely that the connection with the non-aligned, so the Nehru's India, the Algeria, which also coquetted with its own autogestion, with its own self-management system for a point. There's like a beautiful photograph of Yugoslav officials discussing this with Franz Fanon. I mean, it's a really interesting, it was really an interesting moment. Now, why did it all shatter? Here, I think our versions completely diverge. I think the nationalist tensions were always a problem in Yugoslavia. There was the question of Croats versus Serbs was a big problem in the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. There was shooting in the parliament, which is why the Serbian king decided to just dismiss the parliament and rule the country as a proper fascist. You know, before the World War II, there was the Maspok movement in Croatia, which was kind of toying with this Nazi puppet state of independent state of Croatia. There was a huge Serbian nationalist against the Kosovo Muslims, and then Kosovo Albanians. Albanians who actually lived in Kosovo were not considered a constituent nation of Yugoslavia. This is, I think, very important. Yugoslavia, many don't know this, but Yugoslavia means Southern Slavia. So it's the land of Southern Slavic nations. And so non-Slavic nations, like the Albanians, were not considered a constituent nation. And this was always a problem in Kosovo. Yes, it was. It was always a problem.
How is your verdict different? Like
So
what
it wasn't
was
like
the reason?
for the external reasons. I completely agree with Bara that it was the question of well, what happened everywhere in the world. It was a global situation, but for internal reasons, it's I think it's kind of weird to say Slovenians cooked it up and then went away. I think this is what you said, and I thought this was really weird. It's not true, Bara. Sorry, but it's really not. But my question was actually about the Branislav Jakovljević, who also discusses the internal reasons in a different sense. He says that there was a specific shift in the Yugoslav constitution because the earlier version of self-management was discussing the associations of the workers. And so workers within a factory, for instance, would have the actual right to manage that factory. So imagine a factory as a kind of a collective, and everyone is equally responsible for that company or factory or whatever to function. So the constitution would actually focus on the workers' assemblies. And then at some point in the constitution, what was introduced, this is what Branislav Jakovljević says, what was introduced was the idea of associated work. So not workers, but work. And this abstract category of what is the associated work, what is that? How do you do that? Jakovljević then argues that this was the bureaucratic bullshit that kind of already meant a kind of the party resigned at least a little bit from the notion of self-management at some point. Sorry for being so long.
Okay, I will not check that. Can I answer quickly? I will not be that long. Yes, you. Okay, so the first thing, Kosovo and Vojvodina, no? Well, also in constitution they had sovereign power. So this you have to know: 6 nations plus 2 autonomous. So it's not true that Kosovo was not. It was a sovereign power. I don't know. Of course, nationalist problem are always and everywhere, like Albanians and so on. But it was at least some sort of a try of co-living of different nations. For example, of course, there was a centralist language which was Serbo-Croatian, but they were trying to also not like that one language would be the umbrella language, but active multilingualism, which meant, at least for a little extent, that in schools I would learn Macedonian, Macedonians would learn Slovenian, so we would understand each other. At least there was a try. And in every assembly meeting, the national question and the federal question was all the time on the table. So they were trying to actively deal with it. But of course it was present as always, especially because of this frustration from the Second World War, I would say. And this Branislav Jakovljević, I don't think I agree, because they, in the 63 and 74, Kardelj, the Constitution, speaks about it's always very precise, workers and working people. And this is a difference. Workers are the ones who are in factories or like productive worker, and working people are all other who are either maybe scientists, doctors, and so on. And it's not, I don't know where he got this, that then it becomes a personal, no, I don't think so. I will check, but yeah.